Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and I'm ready to tell you my favorite books of 2024. I read 270 books this last year and there wasn't a lot of wins. It's not a secret that my reading year has been kind of abysmal, so I don't think anything here will be particularly surprising to you. But I have decided on 9 books because much like last year, I just couldn't figure out that number 10 position. And tomorrow, much like last year, I'm gonna do a bracket ranking of all of my runners up. There is 32 back here that I'm going to pit against each other and we're gonna figure out what that 10th spot should have been, but also how all of my 5 stars and 4.5s compare to each other. In the number 9 spot, I went back and forth between a lot of books even to figure out what the number 9 should be. And at the end of the day, I just have to select books that had an impact on me. And this is one of them. We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver is one of the most unsettling books that I've read. So of course it has to be in my favorites list. Horror books don't often freak me out. Maybe I don't lean towards horror that freaks me out in general, but this one, there's something about just the ominous vibe of constant referencing of like someone hears something, someone sees something that's abnormal and they turn around and like nothing's there. Just that and the fever dream like situation that we're in left me feeling so uneasy, and I was rereading sections of it this past week to solidify it here, and it still did it. Even though I wasn't reading it in a haunted house this time, I was last time, remember? I'll go ahead and link all the reading vlogs down below that I read all of these books in case you're not up to date with my content. In this one, we have a couple. They are these women who just bought this house together, and one of them is out of the house, one of them is home when this family arrives on the doorstep, and the father says, I used to live here, I want to show my family around. She's kind of a pushover and she lets them in. From there, it just descends into madness, the style of it. One of the children goes missing in a certain part of the house. They start talking about different parts of the house and how it's different. Maybe people have a different reality of the house or things are changing. It's pretty low plot. It's pretty ambiguous. It had these Easter eggs for one of my favorite books of all time, House of Leaves. There's mixed media in here, message boards, and things that just make you so immersed in the story. And I loved my time with this. Before I get to the next one, like I say in all of my favorites videos probably, is that this is not a recommendation list. I recognize that my taste is not always typical, and that really applies, I think, with the next one. I couldn't not include How to Become the Dark Lord or Die Trying by Django Wexler, because this was the most fun that I had reading this year, and it's so stupid, this book, but it was so fun. I love a time loop, and we're following this woman who wakes up. It feels like a video game quest. She, as we learn through the book, has repeated this hundreds of times where she wakes up, she doesn't know where she is or who she is, and she just has to stumble around as if you got dropped into a video game without any instructions and has to figure out how to get to the next level. And she thinks that she has to take down the Dark Lord, and so she keeps trying over and over and over again, and every time she fails and she dies, she has to start over. This time around, when we meet up with her, she is going to try to become the Dark Lord instead. It's self-aware to the point of obnoxiousness. There is a certain style to the humor that's not going to work for everyone. It's very vulgar, it's very sexual, very horny, and the jokes just keep hammering home the same type of humor. But the story just has so much, I want to say heart. Is that what it is? She has to collect all of these people and manipulate these people and creatures. There's like orcs and there's a wizard, yetis, to help her. She has to recruit everybody to help her become the Dark Lord. There's a Dark Lord like competition. It's quite campy, but it has really dark topics at the same time. And it's a little bit of a dude bro take on a female main character. For some reason, I just had quite the time with this. In the number 7 position, I didn't know when I originally read this if it would end up on this list or not, and I just haven't been able to stop thinking about it since, and I reread some sections this week, and I just love how weird it is. So that's Knock Knock Open Wide by Neil Sharpson. In this, it's set in Ireland, and we're following 2 main timelines. Things get more chaotic as the book goes, but in the beginning we have this one section where a woman stumbles upon something horrific in the middle of the night on a late night drive home. It was such an unsettling open. And that night she experiences horrific things that we get glimpses into throughout the book. And then in another timeline, we have these 2 women who meet at school and they start up this relationship, but they have, one of them in particular has some like family drama and trauma, and it takes them just on this strange journey. There is a TV show highlighted in here from these people's childhood that everyone kind of remembers differently. There's a moment where we visit the set. Just remained very slow and tense and interesting. There was so much folklore in here, and it remains something that is so hard for me to describe and pitch to people. It also just like doesn't make a lot of sense. Even once you get the answers, it feels satisfying, but also just like you're lost for so much of it, and I loved that quality. In my number 6 spot is a book that has been so fun and interesting to watch the reactions to throughout the year. It's either people's absolute favorite or people hated it and thought it was so slow and repetitive and pointless, and I guess that's the type of book that I like. It's The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. I had the best time reading this. I thought it was just perfectly done, and I know for so many other people they have a lot of issues with it, but it felt so intentional to me, and I just loved the journey we were on. It felt so mundane and realistic of what might actually happen to you if you fell into this situation where one day you come home, you're a single person, and there's suddenly a person there who says, oh, I'm your husband, like we're married. There's photos all over the house of you being together, and in your phone you have text history with them, you have photos of your wedding, all your friends know this person, and you just have to figure out like, or try to desperately figure out what happened. Did you lose your memory? Like, how did you get here? And then suddenly he goes up into the attic to get something, comes back down, and it's not him, it's a different man. And your life is completely changed. You have a different job, you have different relationships with people, and this man is acting as if everything's fine. Like he just knows that this is a normal life and you're the only one who's lost. She figures out that it's the attic doing something, and so she decides to test it out and send husbands up there. She's kind of, it's like swiping on a dating app, but in real life. You just get a glimpse of what your future is going to be like with the person, and if she doesn't like it, she sends him back. What I loved about this especially is there is logic within it. It's only people that she uncovers this as the book goes on, but what I think is so interesting, and I don't care to like keep from you, is that it's a realistic person she could end up with. It's not the most dramatic versions of her life. She's not suddenly going to be married to like this major celebrity. She's not going to be married to this like horrific man, like serial killer. It's people who she has met in real life or dated in real life or could potentially have as a future spouse. And so she's naturally curious about all of the lives that she could live, and she is just also incessantly Googling how this is happening to her and how to fix it and if it's happened to anybody else. She's also kind of getting to know herself through the story, but it's not like the life-changing character arc that you might expect. But it's this idea of like, when do you stop? Like, when is your life good enough? How do you know it's the perfect person? Will you always be chasing something more? There was also a couple little twists that were so fun, and they came at the perfect point that I loved this so much. Okay, number 5, we've got a bit of a tone shift, but it is equally strange of a concept. So this is Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell. This is one of the last books that I read of the year, and it pretty swiftly ended up in a contender for my favorites, and then I reread it to make sure, because the first half of this I kind of struggled through, and then once I really got what was going on and it became more science fiction than I even knew it would be, I fell in love with it. And I just love concept books like this where it's the reality we all know, but like, what if women suddenly had all the power instead of men? What if you woke up and every single person had a string on their doorstep that tells you exactly how long you're gonna live? What if you woke up and every single item starts to go missing from memory, and there's people who are responsible for removing objects from the planet, and so like nobody can remember certain things? This one is, what if you woke up and all of the white people on the planet had died? They all took their own lives, they walked into the nearest body of water, is the synopsis concept. And we're left with this different idea of society. And the book follows this man who has been incarcerated, and now his life has completely changed when this occurs. He's a professor, and he's getting contacted by a daughter that he never met, and they're reconnecting and they're finding safety because there's little pockets of people and there's little communities being built everywhere, and they have to decide where they want to go and who they want to be and what life looks like now that so many things have shifted. I just like every choice that this book made about what it wanted to say and who it was featuring, and it could have been so many different perspectives and so many different timelines of this one event, but instead it's this very intimate story, just this one man essentially, and the things that he has to decide. He has to decide what to do. His daughter her entire family has died. She is biracial and all of the white side of her family is gone. And so she has no choice but to connect with new people. But she also grew up with a very racist upbringing and was led to believe she had to hate certain parts of herself. And so it's her having to contend with everything that she's ever known. There's parts of it that feel like it's going to be this warm family connection, but it's also just more about the reason that this happened in the first place, shared Black consciousness and trauma, healing and community, but there's also a lot of difficulties and tension between these two, where they're gonna go, where they fit in, and just this very sudden new way of life. I loved getting to learn where the title came from. I think this book had so many beautiful things to say. There's also some like just very heavy-handed messaging that I often love in a book. I thought it was fascinating, very well written, had a great time with it. In the number 4 spot is this paranormal story that I loved so much and was just my style. Again, maybe wouldn't recommend it super broadly, but there are people who love it. So it's The Haunting of Elkwood by Gwendolyn Keist. This is a story that focuses on the teenagers who have to confront their trauma. They're not teenagers anymore, but I feel like the vibes are that they're very much stuck as their adolescent selves. They haven't had this chance to grow up because there's this thing that they have escaped and there's this mystery. The neighborhood that they abandoned, this group of friends in their teenage years, is stuck in this, like it's cloaked in this veil, this impenetrable bubble, and it's kind of stuck in time. And there are all of these researchers and scientists who are trying to understand it and they can't. And where the story could be about that, all of the investigation and like understanding it, that's not what it is at all. It is the girls deciding, specifically one, our main character, deciding to go back into the neighborhood because she's one of the only ones who can. She just has to make a lot of decisions about going back in and trying to save people that may be stuck in time in there, if she can impact them at all, if they can impact her. She also has to decide if she wants to connect with these girls who used to be her friends and the relationship she wants to have with them now, if they can overcome what they've been through and if they can go in together and finally confront what happened, what made them leave to begin with. They are in their 40s and a lot of time has passed and they have a lot of guilt and memories and things to wade through. It's kind of like flatter characterizations. It's not this great journey that they're going on. It's a shorter book and I feel like, again, very heavy-handed with some of its messaging and just a really interesting take to me on a ghost story. It's so hard to pitch to the right person, but it was totally for me. Another book very much my taste, very for me, is in the 3rd spot. This is something that's been recommended to me so many times over the years, and it's just the perfect, quiet, apocalyptic, intimate story that I traditionally love, and that's The Blue Book of Nebo by Manon Stephen Ross. This is set in Wales and we have a mother and son, and there's been this nuclear devastation that we don't really get that much insight into. It's not about understanding how they got to where they are. It's just experiencing them in this short little book surviving and the feelings that they have being the last people that they know to exist. You're reading mostly through, you are reading this notebook. They find this blue notebook and they write their experiences and their thoughts, journal entries, and they share what they feel about each other, what they feel about their journey. They give a little bit of history, hope for the future. I sobbed my way reading through this, and I still will objectively say I don't think it's that sad of a book. It's not totally heart-wrenching, but for some reason, maybe because the child's the same age as my son, and just the idea of watching him, she's watching him grow up too fast. And it's such a heartbreaking concept that she wanted this beautiful childhood for him and wants him to have everything and just be happy, but he has to see death and destruction and he has to survive all of these horrific things. And she's trying to protect him from so much and be a strong presence for him. And then when you go to his chapters, his entries into the notebook, it's him talking about the things that he's already seen that she doesn't even know about, the horrific things that he's witnessed, the way that he's had to grow up, and he wants to be strong and he wants to be a man. It's just a very quiet and intimate story. You learn about past relationships, you learn about their interests. I just loved everything about the way that this was written. I also loved the way book number 2 was written. This was some of my favorite writing this year. It's a book written in verse, and that is Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. This is another story where you're following a young boy. In this, you watch him grow up and all of the things that happen to him in life. It's a mix of ancient myth and a coming of age story. You're following Garion, who is just a regular like boy, but he's also a winged beast. He's an already existing literary character that Anne Carson has taken and given a backstory, given trauma. We experience his childhood and the difficulties he experiences, and then him growing up and meeting Heracles, obviously another mythological figure, and the impact that they have on each other, the love that they have, but also the heaviness that follows them. Garion loves art and photography, and it's about how trapped he feels in his sexuality, in his body, and the way that he sees other people moving about in the world and the life that he wishes he had. There's this section that talks about how that really impacted me, about how he comes to understand that his body does not belong to himself. Everyone can see him, everyone feels ownership over him, he's being abused, and the only thing that he has control over is his thoughts and his own feelings. So we dive into just his mindset. It's tender and it's heavy and it's sad and it's beautiful. I think this is so incredibly well written. If you struggle with books written in verse and finding the cadence for yourself, the audiobook is also fantastic. This is one I would recommend pretty easily, I think. Now, the last one is one that while I was reading, I thought I'd be able to recommend to everybody, but it's really gotten a mix of ratings and reviews. So my favorite book of the year is I Was a Teenage Slasher by my favorite author, Stephen Graham Jones. I grappled with solidifying this as a favorite. I think that doing a live show about it and hearing everybody's thoughts and feelings definitely adds to my experience as a reader, but it made me question myself if this book was that good, and it is. This book is that good. This is fantastic, but obviously not for everybody, and that's pretty typical of Stephen Graham Jones's stuff. So this is about a couple teenagers who live in the 80s in Texas, and the setting and the focus is just why it's for me. It is about slashers. Much like the Indian Lake trilogy, we have a character, not the main character, but there is a character who's obsessed with slashers, who knows a lot about slashers, who imagines a slasher happening around them. And we have the main character who, he's actually an adult. It's decades later that he's writing this memoir for us to read about, like, the summer that he was a slasher and killed people. It's a very repetitive book, stream of consciousness. You're in this guy's head and he's just saying, like, I was a killer, I was a killer, I was a slasher. But I'm really one for the inner ramblings, so I loved it. It kicks off with this house party. Horrific things occur. It's got supernatural vibes, and then this main character, Tolly, and his best friend, Amber, are trying to figure out the mystery of what is going on and why Tolly starts killing people. I feel like we really get to know them and care about their friendship. It was really sentimental at times, but then it's also just this really campy, funny take on the slasher genre. It is so unique. It's one of the most unique ideas that I have seen in horror. There's regular killing, but there's also a lot of horror cliches, but it's in a really self-aware way. For me, it was perfectly paced. I loved everything about this. The tone was fantastic. We were focused on so many different things, and everything about it was just perfect. I love looking through the lens of this killer, but even he is unaware of why he's doing the killing. There's some reveals that are easy to suss out, but I think they're supposed to be. There's some other things that are definitely surprising. And it's gonna take a reread, this and My Heart is a Chainsaw back to back, to decide which one is my favorite Stephen Graham Jones of all time. But I just had such a good time with this, and it couldn't not be my favorite book of the year. So there we have everything that I loved this year, things that had a really big impact on me. There's definitely more back here that are more serious. For the majority of these, it was just the fun concept. Even if it's not a fun book, it's a serious book. I loved the actual journey of reading it. I had fun with the journey of reading it. That's something that was really important for me to find this year, because there were a lot of flops, as you might have seen in my least favorites video where I had 61 and 2 stars. So that's it for me today. And like I said, there'll be another video as soon as it's done. I'll link it down below in the description to talk through everything else that I read and really enjoyed. And that's it for me. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're going to now, or if you hated them. I mean, I'm happy to hear anything, any of your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, any recommendations based on these that you think I would love, that's always much appreciated. Bye.